Welcome to the Only Male Cruz show, the We Own Your Head podcast. Discussing topics that make you say, how and where can we improve as a society? From a Black American's perspective. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Catch us live, be ready to speak. This is a call-in show. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Let's go to work. All right. Welcome to the Only Male Cruz show. I am the Only Male Cruz. Okay, happy New Year, happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. As you can see, the title of the show, January 15th, 2024, Persistent Social Issues. Are there solutions? Listen, I've got a guest that's coming in. We're going to be talking about a few things, primarily DEI, because if you notice, DEI is on the chopping block, and I'm just so strongly opinionated about it. But quiet as it's kept, there's so many pieces that DEI initially, in its purposeful intention, was designed to address, but because everybody and their uncle jumped in on the topic and tried to, get what they could out of the deal, it's been derailed. And so now DEI is quote unquote a joke. Okay. But with that being said, the issues that surround DEI are still persistent. So DEI, by another name, is still DEI. Now I've got a guest who I'm going to bring. I'm going to bring on here, and he's, we've been having conversations about race as a social construct, things of that nature. This guy's got some really deep perspective, and he's not alone in the perspective, but it's one that I'm definitely learning about. And so he's going to help me chop this up, also while adding his racial piece to it. So before I mess it all up, let me bring him on here. This is George Middleton. Hi, George. Thank you for joining the panel today. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
Great, thank you. And I do want to state for the record, there's a couple times you've had me on your show and on your program, which has been very fun, very provocative, very mentally challenging, things of that nature, talking about relationships and social things of that nature. So I'm glad for the opportunity for you to come over here, and now I get to boss you around. I'm joking. No, but if you would.
Came over to my show and burned down the whole set. So,
well, we got fire extinguishers over here, okay? But what I would like for you to do, because I have no shame in saying what I'm not able to do, could you please, for the benefit of the audience, tell us about all these initials after your name and what that means, and give us a very brief overview about this racial construct thing, because it's not the first time I've heard of it, but I have questions about it. There's some challenges to it. So please, sir, take the floor.
Well, those initials refer to my mental health counseling disciplines. In counseling, sexual maladaptive youth behaviors, and another type of intervention called moral reconciliation therapy. They refer to different types of intervention disciplines that I've been certified in.
Okay. And moral intervention, that's what you...
Moral, MRT is moral reconciliation therapy. Moral reconciliation therapy.
Okay.
It's a very unique way of working with young people and getting them to become more accountable and more cognitive about their thoughts and behaviors and actions.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And does any of that run into, and I do want you to elaborate on the overview of race being a social construct, And one thing you said that was just really interesting in a previous conversation we had about how if we the challenge of people that are identify as white. Now you got to help me out here. I told you I'm out of my element here, and I'm here. You're the subject matter expert in this regard, but break that down to me about this social construct and race, and the fact that we really race really doesn't exist, and we should really stop using that. So can you open the door for that one for me?
Well, yeah, every geneticist and scientist worth his salt is on the official record of showing, demonstrating that race is a false concept. It is an idea based purely on a uh, based purely on a notion that the way a person looks is directly related to the quality of that person. So based on how you look will determine whether you are superior or inferior.
Okay. Does that kind of fall in line with like the racial hierarchy
That's
where?
what race, that's
Okay.
what race is. Race in and of itself is an ideology. It was invented by the European in the 1600s purely for the justification of economic exploitation of non-white peoples, primarily the African.
Mm,
And he
okay.
made he made that into a legal uh, system so that they could start forcibly importing Africans from their original land over to the Americas. That's why it's called the transatlantic slave trade. And they needed to come up with an ideology that would make the European social masses be accepting of the barbarous treatment
Mm,
that the transatlantic slave trade used in order to exploit.
wow.
So the Europeans got their country to believe that the African was no better than the animal. And he came up with this contrived scientific mess. They call it scientific racism. That they just came up. I mean, just think about it now. In the 1600s, they didn't know about DNA. They couldn't take blood tests, blood draws. This is purely off of what they see and what they think. And so the labels white and black are actually legal classifications. They were written into law. And so unfortunately what happened is that even though in 1865 when they abolished slavery, they did not eradicate the use of racial classifications as identity.
Mm, mm,
So even though they abolished slavery, they
right.
kept with the social hierarchy of race,
Hmm.
white at the top, which is
Yeah.
white supremacy, and Africans at the bottom.
Okay. So do you think that that was intentional? Do you think they sat back and they said, well, okay, we'll abolish slavery, but intentionally, we're going to make sure we keep in this, you know, Negro and whatever else they call any other ethnicity, if you will. Was that intentional leaving it in? And if so, why?
It was intentional on those who were in power to make these changes. But for the collective society at large, they were unaware of the psychological nature of this thing called race. So they've had years to practice slavery. They've had years to categorize people into white labels and black labels. So now, even though you got rid of slavery, you didn't get rid of the belief in being white or being black.
Hmm.
You just
Hmm.
don't eradicate a belief by a law.
Right. Right. Okay, let me shout out the people in the YouTube streets. A shout out to y'all and in the YouTube streets. Tatiana Harris, Jay Boopsy, Sonia. Listen, y'all. Thank you for pulling up. I appreciate y'all so much. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe if you haven't already. Do like Tatiana Harris say, do like she say. Replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. And Shout out to my people in the Twitter space. Although right now there's nobody in there. There was, but then they cut out. So it's all good. So thank you for that information, George. I mean, it's a lot. That's why I appreciate you spoon feeding me on this, okay? Because it's a lot. You know, I've had conversations with you, like, oh, and you've gone in there, and it's like, okay, well, wait, hold on. Um, so here's my thing, and you tell me what your thoughts are. Okay, it is. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day for us to celebrate, and you know, every year there, you know, people are always bringing up the "I have a dream that one day," okay, and I'm tired of that because they've taken that speech and that sentiment and they've misappropriated it, misapplied it, and you know, and just made it work for them. You know, made it seem like Martin Luther King was talking about them when he wrote it, when we know, in fact, that's not what he was talking about. Um, but so for me in my house, we like the letter from a Birmingham jail. We like that from Martin Luther King because he talks about the real issues. There's no, and this is why probably why the dominant society does not quote that speech or even reference it, because he talks about the reality of what's going on in society. Um, and I don't know how familiar you are with that speech, but there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of bring up um, before we got into the heart of the matter. And shout out to Tiffany Only, please. Hi, Tiff. Thanks for pulling up. Appreciate you so much. Um, so, one of the things, and I got my bifocals on this morning, or this afternoon. So, one of the things that Martin Luther King Jr. brings up is about how um, people, wait, let me find the quote here. He says, you deplore the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham, but your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. I'm sure that none of you would want to rest content with the superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with effects and does not grapple with underlying causes. So, this speech, in and of itself, that sentence alone is enough for dominant society not to reference this because it would make them say, you know what, you're right. We talk about how we want a just and fair system and how there is no racism, but they don't talk about the things that they do that makes us have to get about it, and which is going to lead me into this DEI. But before we get to that, do you have any comments on that? What are your thoughts on what I just said, sir?
Yeah, see, again, as intelligent as Martin Luther King was and intellectually, his intellectual prowess at the time, um, I always say this: beliefs are more powerful than facts. And he was talking to people who really believed that they were better than him. Did you get that?
You said they really believe they were better than what?
Martin Luther King, in the prime of his life and all the work that he did, was talking to a collective group of people that actually believed
Mm-hmm.
that they were better than.
Mm, true.
So no
Okay.
matter what he said, no matter how he dressed, no matter how uh, nonviolent he tried to be, it did not do anything to change the notion for people who identified as white that they were better than those blacks.
Mm-hmm. Mm,
And in their minds, all the things that they believed, the negative things they believed about black people, unintelligent, inferior, dangerous, rapists, thieves, nothing good. No matter what Martin was saying, that's all they could see from their white lens. Does that make sense?
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and and it leads me to reference a comment that you made in a previous conversation you or I were having, and this statement has been said before in different words, but you made the comment to me. We were talking, and you had stated that how ridiculous, and I'm paraphrasing bigly, how ridiculous it is for quote unquote the oppressed to ask the oppressor. Oh, sorry about that. Oops, my bad. For the oppressed to ask the oppressor for freedom or for equity or for fairness. Holla at me.
Right. Um, Now, in the times of legal slavery, um, they didn't ask. Our people, our ancestors fought for freedom. So if you got to fight for freedom, never is there a place in there where you ask your oppressor, will you please let me go? Will you please treat me fairly? Will you please give me the same opportunities as you? It doesn't happen anywhere. You
Mm-hmm.
have to establish your own strength. You have to say, regardless of what you do, white man, this is what I'm going to do. That's the only way that you can operate from, because basing your quality of life on another group of people who don't look like you and believe they're better than you, waiting on them to make decisions for your best interests, is a recipe for disaster.
Mm. So that was applicable the way you described it. Then they fought, our ancestors fought. We didn't have any other choice. We, you know, and so now in today's time, when we have the illusion or the appearance of freedom and equality and whatnot. Um, you're still saying that it's not about asking. So how do we? What is the approach? What's the
So,
approach?
so today it's a different kind of fight, and it's actually a more effective way to fight if we can change our mindset about the fight. Too often, when we're addressing issues of race and inequality, we're thinking there has to be some type of physical altercation. But we have so many other tools at our disposal before we even have to get there. I'm not ruling it out, but it's way down the list of strategies. The real fight is economic, because that's what race was designed for in the first place,
Mhm.
for economic exploitation. So, as an African community born in America, the first step that we're going to need to take is establishing our own collective economic independence.
Mhm. Mhm.
One where we are independent of whatever happens in the White House. We're independent of the surrounding white systems that are out there. We have our own economic base with which to compete with. And we, as the racial black demographic, are the only culture group here in America that does not have its own economic base.
Mhm. Mhm. I totally agree with you. And a lot of that falls in line with what Dr. Claude Anderson, how he addresses things. And let me do a shameless plug and say, um, I'm currently reading. I haven't done it since New Year, but we're in Powernomics, and Dr. Claude Anderson is giving us the game plan um, in which to improve ourselves as a race. So what you said rings very true and aligns as in complete alignment with what Dr. Claude Anderson and others have discussed. I do want to shout out Jay Boopsy, who says, exactly, regardless of what the white man said or believed, our ancestors fought because they believed freedom is already ours. The fight really is really within to just be who you already know you are. Jay Boopsy, go on, girl, listen to you. Listen to you. Um, let's see. And okay, I'm glad you're enjoying him, Jay Boopsy. Thank you, girl. Please share the show. Appreciate you so much. So, okay, I think Georgia, I feel like you kind of laid the groundwork. Now with that mindset, and then everything. I mean, everything that DEI. I mean, real pursuit of DEI. Um, um, those issues. I think that position, if all DEI experts or oh gosh, facilitators were to approach facilitating DEI with that mindset, I think we might get somewhere. Um, but there's still the challenge. So I want to get to this article. I know that I shared with you over the weekend. Let me see if I can find it here. And it was just really, I sent it to you because it was just really disturbing to me. Um, because there's talk that um, DEI really is okay. The title of the article is "Diversity Work Isn't Working. It's time to consider a new approach." And if you really want to sum all of it up, people who don't people don't really want a new approach. They just don't want to talk about DEI, and that's or I don't even say DEI, the things that comprise DEI. And my thing is, it doesn't matter. We can call it DEI, we can call it DUE, we can call it DWE. It doesn't matter. The issues that are made up of it still exist, and there seems to be this problem in addressing those issues. Before I even get further into the article, I want to say this. You said to me, George, that when the George Floyd situation occurred, and this is the thing, DEI got a second wind when George, RIP George Floyd, but when that incident happened, you told me that your phone was ringing off the hook. Do you mind sharing with me that piece again, or not just with me, but with the audience about that? Do you mind?
Right. A lot of people who identify as white were just utterly, mentally, and spiritually traumatized by what they saw on the screen. Up until that George Floyd incident, for most people who identify as white, it was theoretical. But they saw in real time a white police officer traumatically abusing and killing a black male on TV with an air of arrogancy,
Mm,
with an air of dispassion. And then they saw people around him pleading for his life, and he and his three other officers looked at them like they didn't count.
mm,
And so that really, now see, for me and you,
mhm.
that's what, it wasn't anything new.
Right, right.
But for those who live the white identity experience, for a lot, not all, but for a lot, that really threw them for a loop. And it just set them so on fire that they were looking for something to do. So they wanted to find diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives to find a way to try to make themselves feel like they were having a part in the solution.
Hmm.
Now, the work I do is not diversity, equity, inclusion.
Correct.
My work is a whole new paradigm of evidence-based thought
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
addresses specifically race. I separate race from diversity because race is an ideology of division. Diversity is an ideology of inclusion. So you can't mix race and diversity because they were not meant to be together.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you have to address race by itself. And what happened was with the whole DEI piece, initially the DEI movement in America began in the 1960s. It's got its roots in the civil rights movement. But unfortunately, as what happens to many black agendas, it got co-opted.
Right.
And,
Significantly.
and then they added all of these other social isms on. And when you do that, race started here, but then you add gender,
Right.
then you add sexual,
Handicap. Mhm.
sexual orientation,
Mhm.
then you add a host of other identities.
Mhm.
And race is just going down and going down. And pretty much it's forgotten.
Right. So let me ask you this question. So this new paradigm that you're presenting from, that wasn't active and alive when DEI first came out. That's not what people were talking about back in the civil rights era, is
Right.
it?
No.
Okay.
No, my work comes on the heels of people before me, such as Francis Cress Welsing,
Hmm.
um, um, uh, another psychologist by the name of Dr. Bobby Wright,
Hmm.
and other greats before them. That they laid the foundation. And when I read their work, my work takes what they did and starts building from there.
Mm. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. So here's my question in relationship to that. So if we so should people who work DEI and effectively work DEI and effectively make changes and create better environments, both work, personal, social, etc. Should they just stop and begin to adopt your paradigm, or do should we keep the ball rolling so that we don't lose um, whatever headway that we've been able to make?
Well, that's a very complex question because unfortunately, the leaders of DEI today, um, and I'm trying to say this in a nice way because I don't mean to disparage people,
Sure.
but uh, you know, Einstein is famous for a quote uh, where he says that in order to fix a problem, you can't fix the problem with the same mindset that was used to create it. And one of the issues that DEI has is that statistically speaking, 70 to 80% of DEI professionals
Yes.
are white males.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So that should kind of tell you,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
really nothing else needs to be said
Except for because here come Melly Male.
there.
Okay, Melly Male. But because here's the point. Um, why are we? Why did we allow that? Why are we allowing that? And where's the fight? Um, and the main thing. And let me shout out to. I got somebody um, in my Twitter space. The Negro Black Knight. Shout out Negro Black Knight. Thanks for pulling up. Um, and this is my issue about these social scenarios is we make a little bit of headway and then somehow we it gets co-opted and the fight is gone, the fight is lost, there's somehow we fight no more. So I personally I think that from the ideology that you referenced, um, and again it's hard for me to thoroughly articulate it, although I do understand what it is, I just don't want to speak incorrectly. Um, I think that there's a way to buy into that, but still without having to just give up everything and say, oh, well, we'll wait till everybody can grasp this position about race as a social construct. Um, we have to stop where we've either how far we've gotten and do nothing else until everybody buys into that. And what I'm finding is that people, as soon as it looks like we're making some progress, dominant society gets in front of it and all of a sudden comes up with a new way to stop what we're doing. Are you feeling what I'm saying here?
Yeah, the reason that happens, and I know exactly what you're speaking of.
Mhm.
The question you asked, why did we allow that? It comes from two different perspectives. One is racial and one is political. So from the racial perspective, for those who identify as black, many people in that category fall into the trap in believing that we need white people in order to fix racism.
Mhm.
That's a problem. And it's just statistically inaccurate. People who identify as white are the least equipped to solve racism. And I don't mean to say that in a mean way. I don't mean to say that in a criticizing way. It's just an objective fact. If you identify as white, your mere just the mere identity of white is going to get in your way.
Provide an example of that, Avery. Or George, I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
Please.
DEI is an excellent example of that.
Okay.
It started, it has its roots in the 1960s in the civil rights movement, strictly black and white.
Hmm.
But look at it today. Predominantly ran by white males.
Hmm.
And it has not moved the needle towards equality and the eradication of racial disparities.
Right.
So, I mean, it's facts are facts.
Right.
If you identify as white, you may be well intentioned, you
Mhm.
may be a nice Christian going person, family person, you may have black friends, all that, and all that's great. That's
Right.
cool. But you are useless in addressing effectively the race issue. And I'm not saying it because of my personal opinion. Look at the data. The data says it.
True. True. I mean, the data does say that, especially the data as compiled under the auspices of DEI work. I know I did a show, it was last year, maybe 6, 7 months ago. I can't recall. Myself and a couple other people, we were discussing the numbers that come out, and I think it was 58, 60% DEI endeavors, all headed up by people of the dominant society. Um, and then we wonder why we're not making any headway. And then there are some parts of DEI where we've gone, because there's a case in I think it's in Seattle. The city of Seattle's under had some kind of lawsuit brought against it for um, the DEI training that was provided. Just according to this guy, went way overboard. I mean, if I was in there, I'd have been like, "Whoa, wait a minute, you're coming on way too strong." Um, there's just no way you're going to get. I mean, this guy said people were blaming him. He's the reason for slavery, and I mean, they're just, you know. And so I think some of us, and I guess that's part of what really aggravates me the most, is because here we've had an opportunity, and we still have an opportunity to have these kind of conversations and actually attempt to move the needle, or at least speak accurately, at least articulate what the issue is. But then but what's happened instead is we've either been too passive or so extremely aggressive that if there were some ears that wanted to hear, they can't hear what's being said because we're not saying what needs to be said. You make any sense to you? You feel that?
Totally agree.
Hmm.
And the reason it is, it goes right back to what I said earlier when they legally abolished slavery, but they continued the practice of racial identity.
Hmm.
So now think about this. Race was created specifically for division of society. And when they legally abolished slavery, they did nothing to address the ideology that they used to justify slavery. So now you have generations of people believing that they're either white or they're black. And the ugly truth that most people don't want to recognize is that we have taken on subconsciously what those labels stand for. And again, this isn't opinion. This is fact. There's a plethora of psychological research that shows how people perceive black and how they perceive white, how they respond in a situation that is black versus how they respond in a situation that's white. So as much as people want to believe, oh, I'm not a racist, I'm not a supremacist, I'm not a victim, unfortunately, your actions make a liar out of you, collectively speaking.
Let me read some of this article here. Yeah. Okay, so DEI opponents are using a Civil Rights Act section to go after a VC fund that invests in businesses owned by women of color. It's a very clever game. Now, I'm just going to set this up a little bit in that, we've heard from the dominant society, we've heard them say, oh, there's no such thing as racism. That's over. No, there's no racism. No, I don't see color. I mean, what? But when it suits them, and we're going to kind of get into this, all of a sudden, why is it that they don't see color and there's no such thing as racism, but yet when it suits them, they can flip it around and call reverse racism? How can you reverse something that doesn't exist if it doesn't exist coming out the gate? Okay?
Because
so
here's the trick.
Yes.
People who identify as white, they never have to say they're white. People who identify as black, that's the first thing they lead with. So it's all about the words you use. So people who identify as white, all the laws for them really are affirmative action. But because they don't say white,
yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But when you make an initiative, when you make any type of policy or plan or intervention, and you use black,
hold on.
You're done.
Don't say nothing else. Hold on just a minute. Y'all hit the like button and subscribe. Now, this brother just said something. He did. Okay? I got the Negro Commander in the Twitter Spaces. Come up off your mic, Negro. I want to hear what you got to say. How you doing? What's tea?
Hi. Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm
awesome.
Writing, getting little things done. I saw the space. I saw that you had die, not DEI. Die. Shout out to Dr. Short for the jokes on that.
Sure enough.
What I mean is that concept and that model, diversity, equity, inclusion, is very destructive to our community. It's used to displace black men and delegitimize them. One of the examples that I posted at the bottom were two different ones. One's about the TSA. There were I think 3 or 4 DEI fires of high-profile black women or people who I'll say confirming as black people, but they're not black people. If you get what I mean.
Sure.
There might be other ethnic groups, and so these individuals ended up they get into these high powerful roles, and they ended up doing disservice in the community, making us look bad as a community,
Sure.
And I feel like people need to charge these concepts and the people who came up with this thing for a form of slander towards our community, because everybody who screws up now, they're black. They weren't Haitian at the beginning. Like, shout out to the lady at Harvard, or they're not this other lady here, or wherever her background, Jamaican or whatever or whatnot. but she's black, and we get the bag when it comes to the data, when it comes to criminality and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just tired of us getting the bag on that, and these guys are allowed to delineate, and we can't.
Good point. Good point. And I'd like to ask our guest, George, were you able to hear the comment, and what is your response to that, if any, sir?
Yeah, I feel where he's coming from, although I would make some clarifications.
Mm-hmm.
DEI is not what's doing the damage. Race is what's doing the damage. When he,
You know, it looks like, I don't know what happened, but it looks like our guest, looks like his assistant. Oh my goodness. It looks like his, like our guest, I don't know if his device, what happened, but our screen went blank, so now all you have is me. It's still good. Let me shout out Rella in the space. Hey, Rella, over there on them Twitter streets. How you doing?
Hey, thank you for having me. Shout out to Mr. Knight, also in the room.
Mm-hmm.
His last statement that I heard, I totally agree with him, and it's crazy because I'm sorry, you have to forgive me. It's snowing like crazy.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. So, but I agree with his last statement, and DEI is not the problem. Racism most certainly is the problem.
Yes, yes.
And it's the people, and that correlates with, I think, even the last space we just came out of. The people themselves are in positions of authority to the point where they are able to push their ideology, their beliefs, and or their practices culturally through our system, whether it's political, whether it is social, and workforce and the like. So I think we need to start highlighting that. I think a lot of people don't understand the practice Dr. Ben and the Hezbollah team tried to bring about when they were talking about even utilizing it on a law level and the understanding of how it's being implemented. So now we have people who are able to, because they are a majority in whatever industry,
Mm-hmm.
take the reins and say, okay, well now DEI is all bad because for some reason now it's a benefactor for one group or a couple of groups and not the other,
Right.
and that's the problem.
Sure enough. Sure enough. Thank you for that, Rella. Appreciate that so much. Commander, I see you have your hand up. I do need to shout out Nate in the space, and also everybody's favorite, Black American Home. I said Black American Home. Black Majority State Migration. We just call him Black, affectionately. In the Twitter space, thanks y'all for pulling up. George, the people said that when your device did whatever it did, they said, no, not at the best part.
Yeah, can I say that again?
Huh?
Can I repeat myself on that?
Oh my God, if you don't, we're going to have a problem. Go ahead now. What was you saying?
So, like I said, the gentleman that spoke before me,
Commander.
definitely in alignment with his intention of what he's saying, but the words just need to be clarified.
Okay.
DEI is not what's destroying the Black man. It's race that's destroying it. And what I said earlier, what I'm going to say is going to be way off the beaten path because I'm dealing with how people identify. But in race, to be Black is to already be delegitimized.
Mm.
There is no legitimization of anything Black. It's at the bottom in any systemic category that you want to pick. Financial, health, wealth, employment, education, you pick the system, and Black is at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that DEI is catching the flack that it's catching and is getting the brunt of the blame is because, unfortunately, again, remember, 70 to 80% of the professionals are white males.
Mm-hmm.
And white is as white does. So the white male is the least educated about what race is. And what has happened is they allowed a ideological political party to come in and co-opt DEI for their own political agenda.
Mm.
And because the average DEI professional is not educated factually about what race is, it's their Trojan horse. Race is DEI's Trojan horse.
When you say Trojan horse, elaborate just a little bit more on it and paint that entire picture for me. What you mean?
Because DEI says we don't just address race, we address everything.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
But race is in everything.
Right, Avery. Right, George.
Everything isn't always about race.
Come on. Right.
It's not always, every
Yeah.
little problem isn't always about race.
Race centered. Absolutely.
But race is in everything.
Right. Now, I will tell you what, those who have taken DEI and made it about race, that's where they screwed it up at. And this is just my own personal viewpoint, my own perspective based on what I've learned and how I've learned. DEI, the whole intention of trying to address these social ills that no matter what happens, Black Americans are always at the bottom of the category, especially if it's anything bad. We always at the bottom. That if we were to focus on resolving the root of the animus, which we know what it is. This is just a long way of saying this is my long way of saying if we could stop people from being prejudiced or discriminatory, which they all fall under the same umbrella, then a lot of social ills would be corrected. And my thing is we don't have to change your heart. We actually don't even have to change your mind. But what needs to happen, and this is where I feel like DEI professionals fall short, is because for some reason we're not Christ. We're not going to transform you into, there's a possibility that can happen, but half of that they're going to want to change. But the point is that what we as DEI professionals have to do is make it clear that this needs to happen in order for success to happen in this work environment or this school environment or this social environment. How you feel, whatever bigotry and other things of that nature that you harbor at home, that is your prerogative to harbor it at home. But when we are out being non-discriminatory, being anti-Black, it should be a social norm that everyone and their uncle should be required to conform to.
Except that it's an impossibility. What you're asking is not psychologically possible. So, and I'll tell you why. So keep in mind, DEI began as a Black and white issue. So it wasn't whoever you're talking about that made DEI a race issue. That's how it began. That's what its initial purpose was for.
Right.
Okay. Prejudice and discrimination, those are human traits. Mm-hmm. We are human beings. We discriminate. We discriminate every day.
Sure.
We have prejudices about a variety of things.
Mm-hmm.
What I always like to say is race gives everything a bad name. What our natural, normal human characteristics would be, because that's how we were made, when you add race to it, it defiles it. So when prejudice is one thing, but racial prejudice is another thing. Discrimination is one thing, but racial discrimination is quite another thing.
Let me jump in. So, why is it? And I Rella's got her hand up, and Twitter people in the Twitter space, feel free to jump in if you like. Here's why is it that and it seems like when Donald Trump took office, or even right before he took office, it really feels like societally a band-aid was ripped off and people were given the keys to act a whole asinine, okay, when it came to being, I'm white and I say so, and I'm the dominant society, all of that bad behavior. But so even though we know it existed before Donald Trump did what he did, ran for office and whatnot, there still seemed to be a modicum, not much, but a modicum of decorum when it comes to race and race relations. They were still jamming us up. Please don't anyone think that I'm
Right.
delusional. We know that they were still jacking us up. They was lynching folks in California. I can't remember all of the other atrocities that happened before Donald Trump. So they were still on our ass, okay? Just so But
Right.
there still appeared to be a modicum. Now that he got actively into political, that modicum has now just been removed, and folks is gloves off. They out here, okay? Discuss that piece of it, because it would seem to me that um, we could still get some work done. So what do we do about that then? Like, how can we continue to address these concerns? Yes, go ahead.
I always say racial thinking always and only gets racial outcomes. Racial thinking always and only gets racial outcomes. So how does it apply to the presidency? President Obama was named the first Black president. Psychologically speaking, once you frame something in Black, there is automatically going to be a white response.
Mm-hmm.
Automatically. And most of it is on a subconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, you remember when Black radio used to be the thing,
No.
and you'd have people who identified as white, they would say, well, we don't have any white radio. Why do you all get a Black radio station? We don't have any white radio stations.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard that before?
I hear you. I see where you're going with that. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So
and it's the same kind of response like they have with Black History Month.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. The minute you frame something in either color, whether it's white or Black, there's going to be a reaction from the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so Trump is masterful at exploiting white rage.
Mm. Okay. All right.
And he's taken it all the way to the bank, and he plans on taking over the country with his manipulation.
Mm. Have mercy. Hold your point, George. One Love, what's up? Unmute your mic. One Love, are you there?
Yeah. I'm here.
Okay.
I think there's a couple of components here, and I don't want to look at this as it's just an issue where we're only focusing on race, because race is a makeup of different ethnicities, and the piece to that puzzle is the fact that there's never any consequences to delineating who are the groups of people that are practicing the behavior under the banner of whichever race they are. And so, we had this discussion in regards to, why it's important for us to actually get into research and sociology and the science of things, because now we can start to differentiate why cultural practices under the banner of race and ethnicity harm Black Americans even in the workplace, or the practice of racism under the banner of DEI as well. Because again, it's not successful if they cannot quantify or show that the program actually benefits all groups of people, especially the minorities that they claim we are, or the disadvantage that they claim they are, when the gentleman just mentioned that the workforce is heavily white male. If that's the case, then DEI in itself, particularly the program, has not been beneficial or utilized properly, because the people, again, and I'm going to go back to what I said, who are controlling or in powers of authority in the program are the same people who are hiring even themselves over and over again,
True.
Regardless of DEI or not. And so, and I'll end there.
Yeah, no, very true. I agree with that. George, if you want to respond to that, go ahead, please.
Yes, I would just like to make one correction, and when I make these corrections, I mean no disrespect, and I appreciate the intelligence that you have demonstrated here in your rationale, and there's a lot of merit in your rationale. However, there's one thing that I want the broad listeners and watchers of this show to understand: race is not a makeup of different ethnicities. Race and ethnicity are not related in any fashion. Race is completely a social construct created by the European. Ethnicities refer to groups of people in their respective geographical locations and their patterns and ceremonies and cultural beliefs. So race and ethnicity are nowhere connected. They are not the same. And again, race is not a makeup of different ethnicities. That's not what it is. Because to say it like that, unfairly validates an irrational ideology. And race is irrational.
Okay, wind that back. Say that again, but take it down a notch. Say what now?
What do you mean take it down a notch?
I'm just saying, you went extra on me.
Race is not a makeup of general ethnicities.
Right.
Race and ethnicity are two
separate things.
Now, she also stated that she didn't want to just focus on race, but focus on the larger panorama. That's fine if that's what you want to do, but that's what the problem with DEI is that it started based on race. It started it was originated to address the black and white issue, but the white male got in and co-opted DEI, and as the young lady correctly said, it is proven to be ineffective for that very reason.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in race, but in all the issues that DEI is trying to address.
Okay.
But my focus is only on race, and here's why. If you address race, you will also improve those other areas that you're trying to address. Guess why? Because all of these other groups still racially discriminate against each other.
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ community, they want their place in society, but they still discriminate against each other based on race. Gender, you have women who are looking to increase their level in society, but guess what? Women still racially discriminate against each other. So again, it's not, everything isn't always about race, but race is in everything. And you will not be able to get equality in these other areas if you're willing to accept racial inequality.
Okay. So now let me jump in. Commander, I see your hand is up, but before we get to you, sir, because I saw you put a thumb down. George, you can't see the Twitter screen, but we got a guy in here he's not agreeing completely with what you said, and that's okay because we want to hear from you. However, I want you with based on everything you've said. Now, what I want you to do, and shout out to you, Jay Boopsy girl, you know you the one. Um, here's especially with what you said about the race thing. So let me read a piece of this article because this part is super duper important. So DEI opponents are using a Civil Rights Act section to go after a VC fund that invests in businesses owned by women of color. It's a very clever plan. Now, I'm bringing this article up because here we are trying to get something done in society as black women business owners, as black women capitalists who are trying to look out for each other. Like the example you just gave about women, y'all always, y'all giving each other a hard time. Here we are. Here's a shining example of us trying to do the right thing and by us. And yet again, the plan is thwarted. So we can't, how are we going to get out of this bag? So moving forward in with the article. Opponents of workplace diversity programs are increasingly banking on a section of Civil Rights Act as well as funding to minority-owned businesses. Section 1981 of the Act, the Civil Rights Act, was originally meant to protect formerly enslaved people or black people specifically from economic exclusion. Now, here's my thing, and our ancestors fought to get this. This didn't come easy. They didn't just stop enslaving us and say, okay, look, we're going to give y'all this, we're going to give y'all that, and y'all can have this, and you get it right, and you get it right. We fought for these things.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden we got to stop. Let me keep going. But now the American Alliance for Equal Rights, a group run by Edward Bloom, who's making himself a household name, the conservative activist who challenged affirmative action in higher education and won, is citing the section to go after a venture capital fund called the Fearless Fund, which invests in businesses owned by women of color. A federal appeals court temporarily blocked the funding for Fearless Fund's grant program as the case proceeds. Now, I'm going to skip around in here real quick. Essentially, they're crying reverse racism. Now, here's my point. We can't get a damn thing done. So under the race is a social construct, we've got the Civil Rights Act, we've got Section 1981. We have all of these extra back in the day laws that really the provisions were made to ensure that we would be protected as Black Americans, and they're just getting trampled off. So tell me, what is the solution? Or, we made gains there, so we're just supposed to give it up and go home? I mean,
So there's a couple of things there. First of all,
yes.
this particular fund is a private fund.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to lose that case eventually because privately you can do whatever you want with your money.
Right.
You can do it when you're a private institution.
Right.
You have the right to spend your money any way you want to. So all they're doing is that right-wing organization is just making headlines.
Okay. So you're saying Bloom and them is going to lose that case eventually?
They're going to lose it because it's not a public
entity.
Mm-hmm. So they're going to lose it.
Okay.
But here's how they open themselves up for the resistance.
Mm.
Anytime, and I said this earlier, anytime you put a label of color on your initiative, get ready. Get ready because they're coming. If they had just said African, a cultural label, it would have been a totally different perspective because they would have had nothing to shoot from. But the minute you say Black, President Biden did the same thing. He got a little pushback when he made the commitment that he was going to appoint Black judges.
Mm.
He got a lot of pushback from that. All he had to do was just say, I am going to appoint judges representative of our country. It's a word game. You know, if you're trying to make moves, you want to do things that are going to make least resistance. When you play in the racial game, when you're trying to make a move in a racial game, right or wrong, I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good or bad. I'm just saying it is what it is. If anything you do as a quote unquote black individual, and anything that you do and you name it black, you know what you're going to get, which is an immediate resistance. And it's really not a sane thing to do, to say, I'm going to create something and I'm going to call it black, and I want you white people to treat it fairly.
So, do you think Biden knew? Because I think Biden knew he was going to get that kind of reaction, that visceral reaction, and that's why he said it like that. And then he can't blame. I tried, y'all.
Of course he did. He did it because he's trying to get the vote. Because that's the whole thing about politics. And what most people don't realize is both the Democrats and the Republicans have a very intentional racial strategy. They know the psychological game of race, and they're using that on their voters.
Right. Hold on to all that, George. Let me, Negro, who was thumbs down and earlier, he still has his hands up, so we're going to see what he was thumbs down and about and what his comment is, and then we're going to hear from One Love. Go ahead, Commander, you got it. What's up? Unmute your mic, sir.
Okay, I posted down at the bottom part of your screen, the comment section, where I'm citing my sources at. It's actually white women that are the benefactors or make up the majority of the hires when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is at like 70% or something like that. And I have the screenshot and all that, and the sort that I'm citing as well. The other thing that I wanted to touch upon, he might be referring that white men are making the majority of the money in that field. That is a fact. But them actually making up the majority of the hire, that's not a true statement. And that's what I was kind of thumbing down to and referring to.
Right.
And I do have the information that I'm citing from that as well.
Now, if how I'm understanding it, he wasn't saying hiring. He was saying that they are actually running the programs, and that's where the fine distinction comes in. The DEI programs, as we know them, are primarily run by white people and primarily men that are running the programs. But black women and black men are and I say that sparingly, black men, but we're very low in the totem pole when it comes to the running and facilitating of these programs, which to me is the reason why DEI has failed. And my thing is I'm looking for accountability. I'm looking for people who stepped up and said, hey, you know what? I'm down for DEI and yes, and diversity. But all they did was run this thing. I mean, they cut across the field and ran this thing to the chopping block, and you don't hear any opposing voices from these very people that were talking about neurodivergent DEI and DEIQIA and all these other things. Where are all these voices who were taking up space? And never, I mean, you couldn't get them to say black. You couldn't get them to address the fundamental elements that create the problem to begin with. You couldn't get them to do it. And now that it's at the chopping block and pretty much done with, you still don't hear from them. So were they really in it to begin with? One Love, you got the mic. Shout out to everybody in the Twitter space. Y'all be sure to like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and share the space out. Go ahead, One Love, you got it.
Thank you. And so I want to, I want to reiterate what I was saying. I do definitely understand races and everything. And when we look at the categorization of race, and its social construct and how it's implemented. Race is implemented to define a group of people and define a group of people based on the color or complexion or community in which they belong to culturally. So when you say race is in everything, and my response is race is in everything, but we don't define race under the categorization to parallel with ethnicity, meaning that, yes, melanated people are all looked at as so-called black in America. And those who around the world would say, okay, I'm black because I have melanin. But when you look at other groups of people who share a particular different type of melanin or a lack of melanin, they also are put into a category under race, white, black, or non-Hispanic, blah, 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 on applications. What you don't see is the definition of ethnicity for those groups. And that is what I was saying. And so I think sometimes, I guess, we don't try to make the correlation because we want we're not trying to correct even the legal system and applications like a lot of us did going to the OMB, trying to make sure that there were more racial and ethnic categories that can be implemented across the board in the United States, whether it's a job application or the way in which people actually define and recognize people of different racial groups. That to me also is excluded in the practice of DEI, and the people who do that know that. I do not believe that white people are not clear on the understanding of race. As a matter of fact, they are the first people to denounce even Dr. Bell's work and his team, even in regards to critical race theory, and on a legal level. He never even mentioned the implementation of the CRT or racism in any other industry to look at the grand scheme of how people implement and utilize race to harm others. He was using it just on the legal level. And it took a whole lot of other smart people to be like, oh, you can apply this theory to pretty much any industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that got shot down. So all I'm saying is, if we really are going to have a conversation, it's not to, maybe I used the wrong words, not to leave race out of it, but pay attention to how race and ethnicity are never put together and used when it comes to programs like DEI. It's only used in a sense of race, and they never say, okay, well, why don't we have a program called PEI, right? And let's do an exclusion of people. Because that's essentially, if we didn't have DEI, what has been happening to us majority and a lot of other groups who claim that they don't have no representation. So I'm just saying.
Sure. So, and the P would stand for what? One Love?
I forgot.
You said P. Okay, that's fine. That's all right. You said a lot, girl. You always do you always come.
My brain be running so fast,
that's
and
okay.
I was trying to get up this hill, girl.
That's okay.
I was like sliding. I said, hold on, let me go on mute.
It's all good. So, okay. So, George, you were intently listening. I could see that on the screen. I do want you to respond to that, but while you do, we want a double shot from you. So, what I'd like for you to do while you respond to what One Love said is also address a question I put in the chat, which is, what do we do about all of the laws that are on the books that have been enacted specifically to or reference specifically Black Americans? Even though we have these laws and we're not getting the benefit that they were intended when first created, but what do we do about that? Are you saying we need to just throw all that, throw the whole law away? And I mean, what's up? And shout out to One Pap. What do we do about that, George? Go ahead. You got the floor, George.
One Love. That was the young lady that just spoke.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I really appreciate your coming back and clarifying your position on that, because that was beautifully said. I know it takes more words and people have to think more, but that's one of the things if we're going to start to address this racial issue, we're going to have to take the longer path and use all the words so that people are really clear. And I really appreciated the way you clarified your stance, because I'm 100% in alignment on everything you just said there. To go back with what the brother said about the quotes on statistics, Mel Cruz, you are correct. I was not specifically referring to white males, but basically the white male is at the top, okay? And you name the system, the white male is in the top of it. Sure. I have some statistics here about just on chief diversity officers by race and gender. 76.1% of chief diversity officers are white. 7.8% are Hispanic or Latino. 7.7% are Asian. 3.9% are unknown. 3.8% are Black or African American. And 0.7% are American Indian or Alaskan Native. And then it goes to further say that the most common racial demographic among chief diversity officers is white. So, that's the more specific statistical explanation of what I was meaning. So I really am not at odds with what the brother was saying there about the diversity hires. Now, as far as the current laws, the laws aren't the problem. Belief is the problem. You cannot legislate a person's belief system. And you have people who believe in the ideology of race. And once you have internalized that belief and you've taken on a racial identity, if you identify as white, you're going to do white stuff. You are.
Okay.
There was a big story on Coca-Cola, the company, and they got in a lot of trouble a couple of years ago because one of their DEI professionals told the white employees there, try to stop acting white. That's what they literally said.
Right.
Google it up. It's a really amazing article. And it pissed everybody off in that room. Because what you basically told people who identify as white, who really believe with all their heart and all their mind that they're white. And this DEI professionals tell them, stop acting so white. How are you supposed to take that?
Right. Right.
So it's an exercise in irrationality. So when just because you make a law and a policy, look at all the laws and policies that have been made and look where the African American is still today in 2024. It's not because the laws are bad. The laws were well intended, written, very thoughtful. But when you are conflicting with somebody's belief system, it doesn't matter what law you write. At the end of the day, Black is still going to stay at the bottom.
Okay, so 2 things. We need, and Tatiana Harris said it best. Let me see if I can find, yep, here we go. We need a hate crime law, specifically for Black Americans. Now, from your perspective, I mean, there's just no, I mean, what can you say? Because if you say, no, what we need is, okay, what we need is, so we need this because we keep getting done. And no one is being brought to accountability. No one is being brought to accountability. So based on your perspective and the position you're coming from, what about that? Discuss how are we supposed to continue to move in 2024 without requesting, without pressing, without having anti-black hate crime bill or anything that protects us based on our race when everything else is. Just address that for me, please.
Well, there's already a lot of statistical, historical evidence that shows that no matter how many laws you write, racism still exists. So you can write as many laws as you want, but if you don't change and address the root of the issue, you're not going to solve the issue. But let's play this game out. Let's say, okay, let's write a hate law. The only way that hate law would have any impact is if people who identify as white are not involved in it in any capacity.
I mean, as far as like even committing the crime itself?
No, meaning like, so one of the things that a lot of cities do is they have what's called a community police board.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, they're supposed to be objective and make recommendations to unbiased and make recommendations to the police department when they say that something's not quite right in the.
Oh, y'all, you know what? Okay, so Georgia's device has done this again, but here's the thing. He's going to come back. He's going to come back because I'm going to tell you something else he said. I hear you. Go ahead, George. Finish your spot. I see you're back. Go ahead.
So the only way that would work, and it's not going to happen, but I'm just saying the only way that works is if people who identify as white that would be in decision-making power mm-hmm. would alleviate themselves from the situation mm-hmm. and only let the concerned members of the community make the determination. Mm-hmm. Because as long as you have white identity involved in addressing racial issues, you're going to have a less than satisfactory outcome.
Mm. I'll tell you what, George, you've said some things here, and I've enjoyed this discussion with you. And thank you for laying it out in a way in which it can be digested and understood. So I appreciate that. Got to have you back. And I want to throw this out here because I know one of the last times I spoke to you and I said, well, all right, George, so if that's how you feel, what about reparations? How are we supposed to go about these reparations? And your answer was inflammatory, sir. Very inflammatory. And I think my peeps in the tour to space, they're going to find that inflammatory as well. Okay. But it's one that I think it needs to be heard and discussed. So definitely want you to come back. I want to thank you for spending time on this platform today. Really, really, really appreciate it. And you provided some really good insight on some things. I don't know if I do, the people in Twitter space, I want to thank you guys for pulling up. Before we cut out, if anybody wants to come up on the mic, maybe ask one good last question, you're welcome to do so. But yes, I thank you. I thank you for your time. And according to Tatiana Harris in the YouTube street says, agreed, we need to discuss every angle. And I agree with, because here's my biggest thing. I'm looking again at this article. One of the articles was talking about, do organizations need to rethink this area of DEI? And the answer was yes. What worked in 2020 in the wake of George Floyd's death is no longer the right approach today in an age of growing DEI fatigue, polarization, and culture wars. In order to move forward, companies need to move from DEI initiatives to DEI integration. And that to me is interesting because I feel like we don't need to throw the DEI baby out with the bathwater. I feel like there's a way that we can, because I feel like DEI is a solid framework if applied appropriately. You do have those like if I would have been at Coke and sitting inside that class and one of the people said, What we need you guys to do is stop acting so white. I would have told him, get out, get the hell out of here. Because that's not how that works. That's not how any of this works. Okay? That's not how you do this. So that's problematic in and of itself. But we don't need to throw the DEI baby out with the bathwater. Okay, we got Black State Migration in the house. What's up, Black? Unmute your mic. What's up, sir?
Hello, hello, hello. I missed much of the space, but I know there was the brother on the other end. So I wanted to ask, did someone mention the DEI part of it that I see these people posting a lot?
Yeah, well, Commander did kind of say that, and if by that you mean that DEI is dead, is that essentially, because that's what these people are saying with the DIE piece? Is that what you're meaning, Black?
So I think when they say DIE, that they're essentially dog whistling to, their population, that it's death for them, that it's a problem for them to actually expand and keep this thing going. That if you continue DEI, it means death for them. That's the message that I always get out of that. But it's interesting, and it's always about quotas. I think it always comes back to quotas, and the DEI, I think that they're kind of leaning on the end of affirmative action by trying to figure out a way to label this as that,
Right.
and essentially say that it's unconstitutional or whatever they want to, however they want to frame it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. And so when you see these white identifying men primarily who seem to be so vocal about it, they hold all the positions. You just read the stats, George. Commander was just speaking of it too. We all know, and they're the most insecure about the role, and they've controlled it. That's why it's on the chopping block now. So the DEI, aka DIE, they want it dead. They don't want DEI. And again, DEI is not affirmative action. But again, let them tell it. DEI is CRT, and CRT is DEI. They just want it the hell up out of here. That's what that is. But DEI is not affirmative action. If anything, DEI is, let's make sure everybody gets involved. Let's make sure we've got perspectives from everybody, because it's not just that you have, like, if we look at a company wide, you don't just have a company full of white people. You have a company with with multiple ethnicities and races. That race is a social construct, but you have multiple of that. So let's have a representation of the people who work here or live here or whatever. Let's have that on the decision making sphere of things. That's essentially, very, very reduced all the way down. That's essentially what it is we're trying to do. It's make sure that women's voices are heard, and then not just women, but Black women's voices, Asian women's voices. That's all it is. Because without speaking up and saying, hey, we need to make sure that this perspective is considered and that perspective is considered, without doing that, it's typically going to be the 78, 80% white males who are running the whole thing, who have the audacity to tell us that this hairstyle is unprofessional, and my hair has to look like Becky Sue's, and my hair don't grow like Becky Sue's. So now I got to put perms and such in my hair, because stop all that. So that's essentially what DEI was supposed to do, is make other people look up and say, hey, wait a minute, this actually is not all about you. And if you don't realize that, let's look into why you may not see it that way. Let's look at your biases. So there's a lot of things to it. Go ahead, Black. You got it again, sir.
Yeah, so you just said 70-80% white male. So again, yeah, so they want a homogenous society that's run by them. They really don't want inclusion.
No, they don't.
Anywhere in the society. And so I think that, oh man, I swear to God, at some point, we gotta say, okay, that's what you want, that's what you want, that's what we're gonna give you.
Mm-hmm.
I just, for me, because again, I don't got that many years left to live. I don't want my great grandchildren fighting this same fight 100 years from now.
Exactly.
At some point, these people don't want us. They don't want us included. They don't want us to be a part of anything. And so do we just keep fighting to be included and waste all of our energy on that? Or do we simply say, you know what, maybe we're better off if we control what we can control, and then we don't even have to fight you like that, except, at the in the U.S. Chambers of the Congress and the Senate, in terms of things of that nature. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we'll be stuck in this trap
Right.
because if it's DEI today, two decades down the road, they'll come up with another term,
Right.
and then they'll do that for a little bit of time,
Right.
and then they'll try to dismantle that because
Exactly.
that's what they do inherently. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And Black, I agree with you 100%. And that's like one of my statements is, DEI by another name is whatever in the hell else you want to call it. The symptoms and the issues are still there. That's what needs to be addressed. And I agree with you that, especially when you look at a Black state migration and we're running the thing, these aren't going to be issues that are going to be experienced for the most part. These are not going to be prevailing issues. But until we get to that piece, and until we get to the piece that George is talking about, with the majority of, which I don't know if that's even feasible, but with people no longer looking at race as the social construct, but looking at it differently, we still have to address these things because these harms are still occurring. So, until we make the change happen, we have to keep fighting. It's a lot. So,
I'd like to just say a few words. I know you're trying to close up, but I
come
need
on, please.
such an important statement that my brother just made.
Mm-hmm.
It's mentally, and this is why I'm addressing this work from a mental health platform, because race is trauma. This whole thing is traumatic for everybody. And I could just hear the trauma and the exhaustion in his voice when he said, we've been fighting for so long and I don't want to leave this for my kids. I mean, that is a real psychological stressor. For the Black racial population, our objective is to shed ourselves mentally of this oppressive label of Black. Because as long as we stay within that mindset, we're going to always continue to look towards white to give us equity. And it hasn't happened by now. So it will be another 100 years if we continue doing the same thing we've been doing, which is trying to collaborate with white people for a better existence. Not going to happen.
Right.
As a matter of fact, they're now aggressively taking it back the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I like what he said, which was option B. Let's just leave them alone and control what we can control. That's where our solution lies. And you don't have to do the Southern migration to do that. You can control what you can control right where you are, right today, right now. And the first step in that is strengthening our independent economic base. What is the best way for anybody who wants to be a part of the solution in 2024 to do that? Whatever city you're in, find your local Black Chamber of Commerce and become an active, participating member. That Black Chamber of Commerce in your city is your number one economic weapon. You want to start moving towards freedom as a collective community? No collective community exists without its intact Chamber of Commerce. That's your first step. And you don't need to move south to do that.
All right. So here's what I'm going to do. First, let me make sure I say thank you. Okay, George?
Yep.
Thank you. And you're going to have to come back and then let's go over these steps. Because I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this. Black is going to close us out. what if, and you don't even have to answer the question. When you come back, you can answer it. What if our local Black Chamber of Commerce is just like our local legacy NAACP office? I'm so sick and tired of NAACP. Don't make me show the clip of what they did to some Black Americans that came to an event earlier today about reparations. So can we trust these legacy organizations like a Black local Chamber of Commerce? Don't answer it. When you come back, have your answer, sir, because you're telling us something, You okay, Black, you got it, sweetheart. What's up?
Okay, I just wanted to parse this part when it comes to women, right? And DEI and affirmative action and all these other areas. So what we know and understand, I believe, is that white women benefited the most from affirmative action, and white women also benefit the most from DEI. So it really isn't even in that realm a gender issue as much as it is a racial issue. It always comes back to the white race is benefiting from these programs, and they're weaponized against Black Americans, regardless of whatever the programming is. So I would caution, separating women as a whole category away from white men, when in fact white women are the ones who benefit from all of these programs, because they're a fictional minority when they're actually the largest group by design and by default, because there's more white women in the country than any other demographic that you could list, to be quite honest. And yet they benefit from all of these programs.
Yes, indeed. And thereby the white man, their spouse, their significant other, their daddy, their uncle, their brother, benefit too. So it's a circular, vicious cycle. George, you're going to have to come back. So I really appreciate you. Thank you for making the conversation easy for me. Okay, I appreciate that so much. Everybody out here in the Twitter space, I thank y'all for pulling up too. That's it. That is the podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. And until next time, y'all, we will see ya when we see ya. Welcome to the Only Male Cruz show, the We Own Your Head podcast. Discussing topics that make you say, how and where can we improve as a society? From a Black American's perspective. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Catch this live, be ready to speak. This is a call-in show. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Let's go to work.